Hi, I'm Sterling Drew, and today I'm here to talk to you guys about concussions in the game of football. The beautiful game of football is very violent in nature. For many years, people have been focused on the entertainment and glory aspect of the game. But in recent years, as lawsuits, millions of dollars in fact, have added up against the NFL, and social media finally allows us to see how players are living after retirement, the issue of concussions has become a much bigger deal. The game, like I said, is very violent. Every play, players are throwing their bodies at each other. And sometimes this results in an impact to the head. Not every impact to the head results in a concussion, but as players continue to get bigger, faster, stronger, and more athletic, avoiding these traumatic head injuries become more difficult. These injuries actually account for a small percentage of the injuries in the game of football, but due to their lasting impact, they must be talked about more than maybe an ankle sprain or an ACL tear. So in order to talk about how the game can be made safer, we must go over what a concussion is. So concussion is suffered when either a blow, bump, or jolt is made to the head. So the brain itself is enclosed or surrounded by spinal fluid, and the spinal fluid acts as a cushion. So when the head suffers a blow, the brain, it shakes in the skull and it actually hits against the skull. And the brain is much different than just getting a normal bruise. You get punched in the thigh, you get a bruise on your thigh. When the brain shakes around in the skull, it can destroy blood vessels. It harms the brain tissue itself, and it can even throw off the chemical balances in your brain. So there are many different types of symptoms of concussions. Just to name a few, some are nausea, dizziness, and memory loss. They can also be broken down into 3 grades. The first grade is grade 1, which is a very mild concussion. This, the symptoms last for up to 15 minutes. A grade 2 concussion is when symptoms can last anywhere from a few days up to a few weeks, and a grade 3 concussion is only suffered when you actually lose consciousness after suffering the blow to the head. So the symptoms are really dependent on the severity of your concussion. And concussions, everyone, it's tough to avoid concussions. Everyone gets concussions in the game of football. It comes with the sport. But what must be done is you must allow proper healing time, because the issue with concussions is you can heal from a concussion. Your brain can heal perfectly fine. But if you don't give it proper time to heal and you suffer another concussion and you keep this train going on and on and on, that's when bigger things happen, and that leads to CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And what this is when the actual chemical balances of the brain are thrown off, and this leads to some things such as difficulty thinking, impulsive behavior, and depression or apathy. So there have been cases of NFL or retired NFL players that they've gone crazy, and they actually their personality completely changes, and they end up committing suicide. And obviously these stories are really sad to hear. So the thing is, how do we prevent them? Okay. So the first thing we must look at are mouth guards. So mouth guards, most people think the function of a mouth guard is to protect the teeth, but can also help absorb cushion or help absorb impact and stabilize the head. So Jackson Winters from the Academy of Dentistry performed a study. He took 412 high school athletes, gave half of them a custom fit mouth guard and half of them a store-bought mouth guard. So you can go to the Dick's Sporting Goods or Sports Authority when it was still open, and you can just purchase a cheap mouth guard for about $20, $15, $20. And you would take this home, boil the mouth guard in some hot water so it can mold to your teeth. And this, it did get the job done, but you can take it a step further and get a custom mouth guard. So a custom mouth guard is you'll actually go to a dentist and they will get a real mold for your teeth and make a mouth guard for you, and then they'll send it to you in about a week. So with this study, he found that 8% of athletes that had the store-bought mouth guard suffered concussions, compared to only 4% of those that had a custom mouth guard. And the biggest reason for this disparity between the two is that the custom mouth guard had a thickness of about 8 millimeters compared to the store-bought mouth guard, which only had a thickness of about 4 millimeters. So you may be asking yourself, but a thicker mouth guard, that it may be getting in the way, I can't breathe as well. Well, actually, a thicker mouth guard is more beneficial for an athlete, because the thinner mouth guards tend to be more uncomfortable, and as athletes begin to chew on them, they are not as effective. So using a thick, custom-made mouth guard can help absorb a lot of impact, or a lot of the impact when suffering blows to the head. which in turn lowers concussion rates. Next, we could talk about helmets. Okay, so helmets, they haven't changed much since the 60s, which was really just when real face masks were added. So since the 40s, the helmets have been made out of the same plastic. And now you're probably asking yourself, well, especially the NFL, they make so much money. Can't they put more research towards making helmets? Well, they actually have a company based out of Seattle called VCs has been working on a helmet that does a better job of absorbing contact. And it has these little crumple zones in the helmet, which actually they just absorb more shock during these impacts of the head. So now these helmets, they actually haven't been used in the playing field yet. And the large reason for this is they had to pass a lot of testing to make sure that they were equitable for the use of the NFL. VC's, it's not one of the well-known helmet brands such as like Scott or Riddle. It's like a privately owned company, so it was tougher for them to pass these requirements. So now you're probably asking yourself, well, if this new helmet's being made, why hasn't it been used yet? Well, this just goes back to players, and players, they want to use equipment that they're used to. A lot of times players don't want, like when they're playing the game, they don't want to have to be worried about how something feels. This doesn't feel right, like I'm not used to this. So they like using things, they rather use a old helmet that may not be as protective just because, that's what they're used to, and that's what they want to use when they're playing. So amongst lower levels, you could say that, we could force younger athletes to use these helmets so that they can be protected. Well, the issue with this is these helmets are very expensive and cost about $1,500 a piece. So implementing these into high schools, the youth levels, maybe even college, is not very feasible because of the large expenses. And next we can talk about the field hardness, which is often overlooked. Many people believe that grass fields are normally softer than turf fields, but this usually is not the case just because turf fields tend to be kept to a higher standard compared to grass fields. So for example, I went to a pretty wealthy high school, and towards the beginning of the year, our grass field, it would be amazing. I would love playing on it. But towards the end of the year, it would be not much more than just some dirt, a little bit of mud, and maybe a few trains of grass. So Andy McNitt, he actually started the GMAX, and what GMAX is it's basically just a fancy fancy acronym for field hardness. So what he does is he goes around, he tests NFL fields with this instrument right here, and what it does is it just tests the hardness of a field. Okay, so it receives a score, and as long as the score is under 200, that means that the field is safe for playing on. So amongst like NFL, college, they're gonna have the money to do this. They're gonna be able to test it. They're gonna be able to keep the fields up to a certain standard. But with these youth levels, like my high school, for example, or even middle school, elementary school levels, they're not gonna have the money to test this. And even if they do have the money to test field hardness, what are they gonna do if the field's not up to standard? They're not gonna have the money to resod a field overnight or even in a week. So it's really tough. So a way that this could be combated is maybe just increase participation fees so that they have more money to keep the fields up to a higher standard. And lastly, we could talk about rule changes. So football, again, it's a very, very, very violent sport. But that's what comes with the sport. That's why people love it. It brings a adrenaline rush. Like, the audience loves seeing these hard hits. But last year was really the first big step they made in changing rules to lower concussion rates. They implemented the targeting rule, which makes it illegal for a player to use his helmet to strike another player's helmet. And obviously what this does is this reduces the amount of head-to-head collisions. As if you make this type of collision, you will be removed from the game and you can be fined upwards of thousands of dollars. A lot of fans were upset by this rule, along with players, as a lot of times when you're running full speed, it's tough to maybe change how you're tackling somebody in order to avoid making a head-to-head contact. And also fans are upset with this because it takes away like those hard hits, like those loud, the cracking noises that fans have been loving for years. In 2018, which is this year, the NFL has implemented a new rule. Well, it's not really a new rule. The rule's been in place for a while, but they've been enforcing it more. And what that is roughing the passer. So roughing the passer means that the player is not allowed to, like a defensive player cannot land on the quarterback with all of his body weight, and he can also not use all of his force to drive the quarterback into the ground. You know, this may sound great, and it may sound like, you know, maybe the NFL is taking big steps. You know, they're helping the quarterback first, they'll help other positions later. But sadly, the main reason that they're doing this is because, you know, these big name quarterbacks, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, they're playing on Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, like these primetime games. So the reason for implementing this rule is to lessen quarterback injuries so that, you know, they're here for these primetime games so the NFL can continue to get high ratings. So you may think, oh, well, they're actually focusing on player safety. Well, in reality, they're focusing on, you know, just making money, which is sadly what a lot of companies are focused on these days. And as you can see here, quarterbacks only account for 7% of these head injuries. And linebackers, defensive backs, running backs, linemen, they suffer much more head injuries as these are the players that are, you know, constantly throwing their bodies at each other. And it really is tough because, especially for linemen, you know, they're running at each other every play. So it is tough to make rules that can lessen these injuries. But in order for the game of football to stay around much longer, you know, the NFL and youth leagues, all leagues, must really work to find ways to lower these concussion rates. You know, they can implement custom mouth guards, they can improve the helmets. You know, making sure fields are kept up to a high standard is really important because, you know, when falling on the ground is when you get tackled, you don't want your head to be hitting, so, you know, like a surface that feels like concrete. You want your surface to have some sort of cushion. And lastly, changing rules to help lower these big hits to the head can really help save the game of football. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you guys have a better understanding of concussions and how we can prevent them.